Let me get myself situated. Hello. This is my first time being here. Normally I'm at youth group with a bunch of high schoolers. Alright. Well, my name is Shannon, and I'm just going to share basically what God has done in my life. So it's kind of like a whole lifelong journey, which I guess it should be. So there's a couple things to start with. I was born with a hereditary birth defect with my eyes. I wasn't born with eyelid muscles. They actually had surgeries where they took muscles from my leg and created my eyelids. I guess, I don't really know how it all worked out, but that instantly made me different. And that played a huge impact on how I saw myself. Kids are cruel. You know, some people, it's funny as an adult, some people automatically will be like, wow, I never noticed. And then some people, it's the first thing they notice. Because, you know, I guess it's just what you pay attention to, how you see the world, I don't know. But kids are cruel, and I got made fun of every single day growing up. So basically that was one of the lies that started. I thought I was God's mess up. I thought I was ugly. I thought I was, you know, just something was wrong with me. It's not cool to be different. You know, just all of those things kind of planted. My parents got divorced when I was 7. My mom left us. She came back and has been in my life, but I was raised by my dad. And that again made me different, especially in the 80s. You know, divorce wasn't as common, and 2, nobody was raised by their dad. But my parents are both on their 4th marriages now, so divorce is a huge thing in my life, and my mom leaving left a deep scar in my life. I didn't even know it at the time. My dad told me one time, he went into a dressing room at a store and told me to stand right outside. And he said, as soon as he walked in and shut the door, I started crying. And he comes out and he's like, what's wrong, what's wrong? And I was like, I thought you were gonna leave me too. So it definitely left a scar. I learned from that, and some of more lies that I kind of learned was, you know, the people that love you or that are supposed to be there, you can't trust. People will always leave. People always betray you. You know, those are lies that Satan was putting in me that I was deciding were true. And growing up, I didn't know God. God did not exist in my world really at all. I mean, if someone asked me if I believed in God, I would say yes, sure. But I knew nothing about it. Wasn't raised in church. Wasn't something that was talked about at all. A couple other things that kind of shaped my childhood and my beliefs was my parents' multiple divorces and marriages. Also, a couple of them, my uncle committed suicide when I was 9. It was my dad's brother, and he took a bunch of pills and committed suicide. Sadly enough, his wife committed suicide last year, also. Yeah, lots of depression in my family. And also, my mom, one of her husbands, my stepdad Bob, was an alcoholic and became abusive. So, though I didn't live with my mom, I would spend summers there and different times, and I can remember one time we left, like she woke us all up in the middle of the night and took us to the hotel that she worked at, because she was afraid he was going to come home and hurt us. So there was a lot of just fear and insecurity and, you know, issues with death. I had a friend killed in a car accident by a drunk driver when I was 13. On my 13th birthday, she died. It's not so bad when I list it all together. I did actually have a good childhood. It wasn't all bad and horrible. But these things kind of all left an impact on me. And so by the time I was a teenager, I was really insecure. I hated myself. I didn't like the world, and I struggled with depression. I didn't really realize what that was at the time, but it's something my mom has struggled with in her life, obviously my uncle. So it's been in my family And there was just a darkness. Like, I didn't know how to deal with the pain that I felt. I didn't know how to deal, and I also was a very empathetic person. I'm a counselor. I have a degree in counseling. It's what I love to do. People always came to me with their problems growing up. And mainly because I could feel it. Like, I can look at people and sense their pain, and it's a gift God's given me, but as a teenager, I had no idea what to do with those emotions and what to do with those feelings. And it just overwhelmed me so much that I wanted to commit suicide. The only thing that kept me alive was knowing what it does to the people left behind. The good thing that came out of my uncle's suicide is I didn't commit it, because I saw the devastation it had on my family. My dad walked away completely from God and just became an atheist after that, and just had so many things that it affected him. But in that, I still didn't want to live, and I didn't know how to deal with the pain, and I would sit there with a bottle of pills and wonder how many it would take. I mean, to the point of I wouldn't even take a Tylenol if I had a headache, because I was afraid I would take the whole bottle. And so I was in this pain. I was very angry at the same time, partly because I became a fighter. It was the only way I knew how to get through every day. When you're made fun of every day, it was either, come let them see me cry or learn how to fight my way. And obviously I'm not very big. So beating people up was not going to happen. That's what my dad did. That was how he solved it. Didn't work so well for me. I did get in a couple fights, mostly with very large teenage boys. Not a good idea. So words became my power. I could kill somebody with sarcasm and my words, and I just had this wall that it was, you can never see me hurt. So I never let anybody in. So as I'm struggling, I started drinking at 13. I tried smoking, but I didn't like that, which was good because I didn't really like drugs. So alcohol was my thing, mainly because my family has a lot of alcoholics in it, and we are functioning alcoholics, which means you can drink a whole lot of alcohol and remember everything and continue on with your normal daily life. So I never thought I had a problem, I just thought I had a high tolerance. So I turned to alcohol to deal with the pain. I just wanted to be numb. I didn't want to feel anything anymore. Just getting through, I didn't want to live. I mean, I would drive my car at 90 miles an hour and just pray someone would hit me. Because I was like, well, if I don't take my own life, yes, it would hurt my parents, but, it's an accident. But obviously God did not allow that to happen. When I was 17, I got the brilliant idea to steal alcohol from Publix. That's where I worked. Now, stealing was not something new to me. I'd been a kleptomaniac since I was about 8. I don't know why. I never asked for things, so I just took, because I was afraid to ask, because that would be relying on somebody for something. I didn't do that. So I got caught, and I learned my first taste of grace and mercy. The store manager just treated me like a father would treat his daughter. I mean, they didn't press charges. I was lucky because, during all of this, I still made straight A's. I was a cheerleader. I ran track, but on the inside I was dying. No one knew. Like, I do counseling, and we do all this stuff about suicide, and you have this list of warning signs. And yes, there were some, but they were really hard to find. Because I would sit there desperate for someone to say, Shannon, what's wrong? I know something's wrong, tell me. But no one did. Mainly because I always had a smile on my face. And I was the person going to them saying, hey, what's up? What's going on? And I just wanted someone to do that for me. But at that time, I didn't realize everybody didn't operate like me. Like, I can look at someone and see that. Not everybody has that gift. But it took me a long time to learn that. So after I got caught stealing alcohol, that shook me up. Because I was like, okay, I have to have scholarships to go to college. I do want to go to college. This could have really messed things up. So I quit drinking. And a couple months later, I started dating this guy who was a Christian. And funny enough, never shared Christ with me at all. Dated for a few months. He went on. I couldn't go to church with him because I worked in retail, and it was getting close to Christmas season, so I had to work Sundays, and I had a college class on Wednesdays when they had youth group. So he went on a retreat after Thanksgiving, and I couldn't go because I had to go visit my mom. And came back and broke up with me because I wasn't a Christian, which rightfully so, he shouldn't have been dating a non-Christian. However, still never shared Christ with me. Thankfully, his best friend, who I'd known for years, my friend Ryan, did. He spent 2 weeks with me going through the book of John and trying to answer my questions because I was mad. I was like, oh, you broke up with me because of God? Well, I hate God now. But Ryan, he'd become a Christian a year before, and he knew where I came from. And then I finally was able to go to the youth group. And that night, the youth pastor was talking about having a God-shaped hole and how we try to fill that with things. And I was like, well, I have tried that. You pretty much name it, I've tried it. Other than drugs, which I had the opportunity. I didn't really like being out of control. So, thankfully, I decided that night, I was like, you know what? I've tried everything else. I'll give Jesus a chance. Sure, I'll do it. And I threw my life into that church. To the point my mom thought I was in a cult. Thankfully, God surrounded me with some really godly friends. And that youth group really discipled me. And really walked with me through, what it meant to be a Christian and live that out. Funny thing is, you would think, okay, yes, I'm saved, I'm going to want to live. Oh no. I get to go to heaven. Can I die now? Heaven is great. I want to go now. To the point of, I would pray daily for a terminal disease. I was like, God, if I could have a year to live, that would be great. I could say my goodbyes, I could do everything I wanted to do. Yes, that would be great. So that was my prayer, literally from 17 to 21. But I kept seeking God, and He gave me the verse Jeremiah 29:11. That has been my life verse, and it's so popular and it's so simple. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you hope and a future. For me, I never had hope. I never thought there was a purpose for me being here. Because you have to realize, I thought I was a mistake. My mom leaving me affected me. Well, I had a family for 10 years. My dad remarried when I was 8. And I had that family from 8 to 18. Summer after I graduated high school, my stepmom Lisa left my dad. And she looked at me and said, I love you like a daughter. I'm not leaving you. She walked out that door and I didn't hear from her till 2 years ago on Facebook. So again, all of those feelings of abandonment, all of those things that I didn't even actually know I had, whoosh, came way up. And I just shut off from people. I was good with God. Me and God, we were great. Jesus, I loved Him. I got God as a father figure. I have a phenomenally wonderful father. I am a daddy's girl. And I have been blessed beyond belief with a wonderful father that has been there for me. Somehow that didn't quite speak to me the same way growing up. Didn't realize the power of that because I always believed everybody left you. But somehow my dad never left me, but I didn't quite see that for most of my life. So seeing God as a father and that type of love, I understood that. That was easy for me to grasp. Some people who've been abandoned by their fathers, that's a hard thing for them to grasp. But I understood that. So me and God, we were cool. And I continued living for Him and walking that out. And I went to college at Flagler. I was supposed to go to UF, but God changed that, which was really good because I probably would have went right into drinking because my first semester even at Flagler was hard. Because it was the first time I hadn't been surrounded by Christians. And I hadn't had that support system in that community, and I didn't know how to live without that. I didn't know how to deal with temptation with alcohol around me, because I had quit drinking, became a Christian, and nobody around me drank. But obviously in college, it doesn't matter if you're old enough or not. So definitely stumbled, but during that, God revealed to me a love for teenagers. I minored in youth ministry, majored in communications, and ended up loving youth ministry way more. And I had an opportunity to go to England and do ministry there for 10 months. And it was kind of like Bible college, and we did a ton of youth ministry. We worked at a rehab place. We did so many different things. It was incredible and amazing. And that's when I realized that time period I kept wanting to live kept getting longer and longer. Till I finally realized, there's a reason you have me on this earth, God. Till I realized Jeremiah 29:11 was true. And all those other verses in the Bible that talk about the plans God has for us, and that before we were even born, He had works created for us. It made sense. I was like, there's a reason. There are things you want me to do. So I lived that out. What brought me to Orlando is when I came back from England, I became a youth pastor at a church in Sanford. And, I came here, and some of you guys were part of Evolution over at Northland and met people there. I met Megan, and I ended up, she became my roommate at one point, and she is now again. And through that group of friends, God revealed something to me. See, when I used to share my testimony, I kind of shared, I had depression, but then I became a Christian. Well, the reality is, Christians still suffer from depression. And I would pretend that I didn't. I put that Christian smile on my face and pulled myself up on my bootstraps and go, no, I can't struggle with that. I'm a Christian. We don't have those kind of problems. And to the point of, I sat at a Bible study, and I did not cry in front of people at all. And I'm sitting there, we're reading in Romans, and I just start crying. And I have long hair, so I'm sitting there, my hair's covering my face, and I quickly run outside. And of course I forgot my keys, so I couldn't leave. So I'm trying to get myself together. Finally get myself back together, I go back inside, sit down, bam, start crying. And I'm like having this war with God, because He's basically saying, Shannon, you need to tell them you have depression. Now my roommates knew this already. Even if I hadn't verbalized it, living with me, they knew I would hibernate for days at a time and have to kind of draw me out sometimes. I just talked it up. I was an introvert. It was a little more than that. So I did finally say it out loud, like, I do have depression. I struggle with this. And my Bible study prayed for me. And one of my other roommates, Laura, sat down and called out some things in my life that needed to be worked on. It was a hard conversation. We're both sitting there crying, because God had now broke this dam that I had no control over crying, which He still hasn't given me that back yet. And, they really helped me start to tear down that wall, because I was not vulnerable with people. I became vulnerable with them because they had stayed. They had, when people that were going to be there for me day after day after day, and I could trust that, I would let them in. But I would not be vulnerable. I would not put myself out there. I wasn't willing to risk, rejection. I was terrified of rejection. Fear controlled my life. I didn't even realize how much it did. But God started revealing that and started some healing process through that. And in 2008, in the fall, I decided to go on a trip called the World Race. It's an 11-month mission trip to 11 different countries. And we had a training camp in October. And I went there, and they did a lot of, the main purpose of it was really our healing and making sure we were spiritually set to go out there and pour out. And my depression's always been like this dark hole that I would fall into. And when I became a Christian, Jesus had my hand, but I was still hanging in that hole. So I knew I'd never hit that rock bottom that I'd always hit before, because Jesus had me, but I was still in that darkness. And during one of our worship sessions, I was just praying and worshiping, and God gave me this vision where I'm in that hole, and he has a hold of my arm, and he looks at me, and he just smiles, and he pulls me out of that hole, and he seals it and covers it up and stands on top of it, and he wraps his arms around me and says, "Never again. Never again." And I have never struggled with depression since that day. He healed me. And it was incredible. And he also set me free of the spirit of rejection. Basically, he told me, you have to be vulnerable. He's like, as much as I love the relationship you have with me, you have to have it with other people, because I created you to be in fellowship. And you can't do what I need you to do unless you let people in and you open up your heart. Because I had become so hard that I just couldn't even be as effective. I couldn't even be me. I didn't know who I was because I was too busy trying to be who I thought I should be. And he told me, people will reject you. It's life. But I will be there to pick up those pieces. I will be there to carry you through it. I will never leave you. I will never reject you. And you've got to trust in that. And I chose to. And going on the race, I was on a team with all girls, which is hysterical because I didn't really like females. Being abandoned by two moms, was not a fan. My one roommate, Laura, before I left, said, "You're going to be on an all-girls team." And I said, "No way." Haha. So I was put on this team with an amazing group of women. One of them we fought constantly, mainly because we both were very similar and needed to work on very similar things. But I loved her to death because she was the iron that sharpened me. And they just called things out in me, and they helped me grow, and they were there for me, and they believed in me, and they looked at me and goes, "We love who you are, not who you think you should be. We like the real Shannon. The other Shannon, not so much. But be you. God created you who you are." And that was hard, but I learned. When you're living with 5 other people in very intense circumstances, you can't hide. Those things. It's not even like living with people like roommates. It's even more intense than that. God just revealed himself on this trip. Provisions, trusting in God. I had to raise $14,000. Never did that before.
Wow.
And God provided in amazing ways. It was just overwhelming how he did that. And during the trip, there was just so many times I saw him work. We lived off $7 a day. We had $500 per country, and some countries that was a lot of money. Some countries that was not. And God he would just expand our food. We always had enough. It was just crazy and how he set things up. There was times when we were trying to figure out how we were going to get places, and he just provided transportation. Like one time we rented cars because it was the cheapest way in South Africa, and we had to get to Botswana. And we had to take this detour, and there were some people on the side of the road that were wanting to hitchhike, which is very normal. So we were not all girls, we were with another team that had some guys, and we felt like we were supposed to pick this one woman up named Grace. She was going to her father's funeral. She was trying to get there, and she was in Botswana. So we picked her up and we took her, and she is a believer. And we get to the border, and we can't get across because we have to write down our address. Well, we knew where we were supposed to go, but we didn't know what the address was. So Grace gave us her address so we could use that. And it was just so cool because we wouldn't have been able to get across if we didn't pick up Grace. And God knew that, It was so cool how he just did that. He provides for stuff. One time we brought this huge 10-pound bag of rice into, it was Botswana, because we had to bring all of our food with us. And we're like, we aren't going to eat this. We had another 1-pound bag that lasted us or something. Well, one day, every Saturday, the missionaries we're staying with has all the kids from the village come. And they always feed them. But they didn't have anything to feed them that day. And we were like, whoa, we got a 10-pound bag of rice. We ain't gonna use it. And it was just the right amount of food to feed everybody. Like, God just knows those things, and to see him work like that was so cool. So I came back from the race, pretty transformed. A lot of people that knew me before met me after, and could see changes in me, which was really humbling and great to hear. I got, you live out of a backpack. I slept on the floor. It was all 6 of us in one room half the time. So when I came back to the U.S., I came across this job in counseling in North Carolina. And see, I always wanted to get out of Florida. So, I'm interviewing and doing all this stuff, and a part of me was like, no, you're not supposed to take this. But I was like, oh no, it's all perfect. It's going to get me licensed, it's good money, I get my own place, I'll have all these comforts, everything's falling into place. That's how you work, God. But then there was still a part of me that was like, no, but I just kept pushing that aside. So I moved to North Carolina for this job. I got fired and rehired the first week. That should have been my first clue. Yeah. So I moved there in February of 2010, and my birthday's May 13th. By May 13th, I had a mental breakdown. The job was the worst job I've ever had in my entire life. The company was horrible. The stress that it put on me, I broke. Once again, God providing. Like 2 months before that, my stepmom goes to my dad, you need to go see Shannon for her birthday. I don't know why, but you just need to go buy a plane ticket. So thank the Lord my dad was coming that day, because I really think I might have lost it completely if he hadn't come that weekend. Because I was at the point of, Dad, come pack me up and take me back home. This is horrible. And during that time, I realized I disobeyed God. Basically, when I kind of pushed those little nudgings aside, and God was like, all right, I'll let you do it your way. You want to learn the hard way? That's fine. So I sat there just crying out to God, like, God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I was prideful. One of the things was, come back from the race, most people are a mess. Which I was, but I kind of was like, oh, I got a job, I'm moving, did this in 2 months. Look at me. I mean, I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. And God just brought me to my knees and just said, hey. And I just broke, and I repented, and I'm, okay, God, and I got through that weekend with my dad, and we talked about ways to deal with my job, and I was like, oh, I'm going to find another job. Okay, God, this isn't where you want me. I'm ready to be done. Just because we repent and we realize we were wrong does not necessarily mean that God is done with us. Because the only word I got from him was wait. It was not give me another job. It was not you can quit. It was not that you could pack up and go back home. It was wait. Well, I didn't like that very much. I mean, the stress of this job brought me to a place where I did not eat for 4 months. I lost 15 pounds. I'm not very big to begin with. And I lost weight. I lived off about a protein shake a day, because that's all I could get down. I couldn't even drink coffee, and those that know me, I really like coffee. And another thing, how God brought me through that, I have low blood sugar. I'm not hypoglycemic, but I'm pretty much that. It doesn't show up on tests, but the doctor's like, you've got all the symptoms. So I pass out when I don't eat. I did not pass out once that entire 4 months. He carried me through that, and during that time, I just clung to him. I mean, the stress of my job was so bad, and I counseled, like, at-risk kids that, one of my kids had been locked up for throwing hatchets at his sister, and I had him afterwards. And I would help these families restore it. And that part actually wasn't the bad part. It was the company I worked for. But that's a lot of, when you're a mess, and then you gotta go deal with someone else's mess, I'd be in the car driving from one family to another in tears, like, God, get me together so I can get them together. And I just learned how to cling to him in a way I never had. And he brought me to the place where I was like, you know what, God? I don't want this apartment. I I don't want these fancy things. I want my backpack and my sleeping mat in a corner. Because I had joy and I had peace and I was ministering and I was happy. And he worked out so many things. I broke my lease, which my place didn't allow you to break it. You just had to keep paying until someone moved in. Well, I moved in with a friend. I didn't have enough to pay 2 rents, but I was like, God, if you can do it by this month, I'll be able to afford it. And he did. He had new tenants in by that month. And he just kept providing. And thankfully, he gave me an amazing church up there. An amazing spirit-filled church. A church I've never experienced before. And a family that kind of just took me in. They were actually from my hometown, Vero Beach. And they just took me in and helped carry me through this. And thankfully, I had overcome my fear of letting people in. And I leaned on people. And even in this hard time, my old roommate Laura was like on the phone. She's like, Shannon, I'm worried about you. You know, how are you dealing with it? You know, is that depression? Are you struggling with that? And I was like, no. Even as hard as those months were, that darkness and that hold that depression has wasn't there at all. Like, yes, I was sad. Yes, I was hard. But there is a hold that depression and darkness has that wasn't there at all. Like, God, it was done. And he just walked me through that. And October 1st of 2010, he allowed me to go back to Florida. And I'd never been so excited to come back to Florida. Partly because when I was on the race in Thailand, I worked with women that are involved in sex trafficking. It became kind of something I really cared about and had a heart for. And there's some people in a ministry here in Orlando that was doing stuff with this, specifically with American kids, American girls that have been in traffic. And I started doing stuff with them, and that's what brought me back to Orlando. Because I had an opportunity to work for Teen Challenge and go to California. So I was like, God, where do you want me to go? And he wanted me to come back to Florida. And the thing about coming back home was I had no job. I had no plan. This is not how I operate. I've always had a job. I've always had a plan. I've always had what he wanted for me to do. But he said, no, you need to go back. So I came back in November of 2010. I moved back home in Vero Beach with my dad. And God provided me in January a free place to live in Orlando. And I got to live there for 7 months. And during this time, God told me not to get a job. Okay, that was hard. I was like, God, I'm really capable. I can work. I want to work. I have no problems working. And he's like, no. He goes, are you going to believe that I will provide for you? Are you going to believe that I have a plan and a purpose? And are you going to live that out even when you don't see it? He said, how far are you going to trust me? And I walked that out, and God provided for me. I had a free place to live for 7 months. Eventually, he allowed me to have a part-time nanny job, where I used quite my counseling skills with this 2 boys. I did. I loved those boys, but they were a handful. And I got to go on 2 mission trips. I went to Peru with one of my teammates from the race, to an orphanage she has been a part of for years. And I took a group of 17 and 18-year-old girls to Thailand to go and prayer walk and minister to people on the streets of Phuket, where sex trafficking is just rampant and women are sold and bought regularly. And I got to pour into these teenage girls on my team. And God just showed me and reminded me the love I had for them and the calling that I have for American teenagers. And it was amazing, and he provided for all of my needs. I mean, even little things like my friend Laura's car in a freak accident got totaled when it was at the auto shop. Needed a car. I was going out of town for the weekend. Well, she saw that I needed my oil change and decided to get my oil change for me. Well, I was about to go out of town and I needed my car the next week, but I didn't have money to get my oil changed. And my first car caught on fire because the oil pump blew, so I'm a little fanatical about the oil change thing. So, it was one of those things like, God, you provided, and he just kept doing that. I mean, he provided so many things during that time. I got my tax return, and for 2011, I made $2,000. That's what I lived off of. I did not lack food, I did not lack shelter, I did not lack clothes. I didn't live like a hermit. You know, I was out and I was serving and I was fellowshipping and I was doing all these things, and God provided. I don't even know. I was shocked when I saw my tax return and how little income I had. But He provided for everything, and in November He provided me with a job. He's called me to be a juvenile detention officer. I love teenagers, but this is a whole new world. I mean, those kids are great, but I've never handcuffed anybody, but now I'm becoming a pro. You know, God is just incredible. And I was broken, and He healed me, and He gave me not only healing and salvation, but He gave me freedom. Because so many times as Christians, like, we get saved, but we're still walking in bondage. We're still walking in those lies that Satan gives us. And we have to choose. Like, He set me free from the fear of rejection, but I still had to walk it out. Like, there was one time in Cambodia, I walked by two of my teammates, and in my head they're like, I hear a voice going, they're talking about you. And I instantly was like, no, I know them, I know they are not, I know that is you, Satan, stop it. But then by the time we got to Africa, I was a bit tired, and I walked by the tent, and two of them were talking, and that same voice kind of chipped in. They're talking about you. They don't really like you. And I started listening to it. Instead of stopping it and saying, no, I know God's truth. I know what is real and what is not. I started to listen to it. And let me tell you, that tore me apart for a while until I sat down and confessed to my team what was going on. And was real. And once again, God likes to put me out there. I had to stand up in front of 50 people, my entire squad, with tears running down my face. It's a whole thing about me being vulnerable, and tell them I need them. Those words, I need you, were the hardest words for me to say, because that made me vulnerable. It made me have to rely on somebody else. But God put me through that, and it's realizing following His plan for you is the most powerful thing you can do. And He will provide you with what you need, and He will get you through it, even through the dark times, because it hadn't been easy. I went through dark times, but He had a purpose for them, and He transformed me and has given me faith that I never had before by walking through that. And we have power and freedom that we get because Jesus is in us. We have the Holy Spirit. We have that ability to tell those voices in our head, no, shut up, get away. Because every one of you guys have those voices in your head. Because Satan knows how to get at us. But the reality is he does not have power. But he makes us believe that he does. And when we choose to listen to that instead of God's truth, Satan wins. So that's my story.